Hi there. The Intoku Code by Wade Ishimoto. This is the story of the officer who became the intelligence officer for Delta Force. And the book covers his entire career prior to Delta and post-Delta and post-military. I'll mainly concentrate on the Delta Force aspect, but we will have a look at his entire career. Wade Ishimoto was born of Japanese heritage in Hawaii, and he joined the army in 1961, initially assigned to the military police. A couple of years later, he was sent to counterintelligence training and then was deployed to Korea, which was pretty much a hotspot at the time with cross-border incursions. He then pursued a college degree, was assigned to Hawaii, where he started training in Goju-ryu karate under Sensei Oshiro. One of his fellow trainees at the time, or one of the seniors there, was Tino Seberano, who later was the chief instructor for Goju Kai in Australia. And Gary Spires trained briefly with Tino. Wade was then deployed to Vietnam, where it was really starting to hot up to a great extent, and after being initially assigned to a mechanized unit, managed to get himself into Special Forces 5th Group, and was on the periphery of the investigation which became the notorious Green Beret murder trial. While I was in Japan, I read the book of this case, which was called Court Martial, co-written by Robin Moore. Quite an interesting story. He was then deployed to Okinawa, and he continued Goju by training with Toguchi Sensei, and then to Fort Bragg, where he was assigned to the Special Forces Center. And sort of condensing everything that happened, there were some personalities such as Forrest Foreman there who recruited him to be in the nucleus of the group who was starting Delta Force under Charlie Beckwith. So he was really in on the ground floor of the stand-up of Delta. He was given a reserve commission as a captain, but was still an NCO in the regular army. The book discusses Charlie Beckwith's attachment to Tutu SAS and his struggle, his fight to have an SAS type unit stood up within the American Army. He very much wanted to adopt the British concept of special operations, and it took a long time, but Delta Force was his opportunity to put all his ideas into action. The core group at this time included Curtis Hurst, Chuck Odorizzi, Bucky Burris, who went to Hereford and passed SAS selection under Lofty, and Sergeant Major Country Grimes. The book discusses the role of Blue Light, Bob Mountell's unit, which was the interim unit, and we reviewed a few weeks ago We Defy, the Secret History of Special Forces, which covers this in considerable detail, and I'd recommend you have a look at that book. At the time, Major Long was the intelligence officer, and Wade worked to him. And they established links with all relevant intelligence agencies. The big thing about the role of Delta was it was information-based, intelligence-based. They needed to know what was happening, what the terrorists were plotting, what they were up to in various parts of the world, in order to prepare well in advance to adapt the training for possible attacks and scenarios. So these links were vital. They then ran the first selection course, and amongst the people that produced was Walt Shoemate and Logan Fitch, who was to become B Squadron's commander. Also Pete Shoemaker and Jerry Boykin, who also were destined to become squadron commanders and then unit commanders. They were very strong additions to the Delta Force. After a couple of selection courses had been run, then they ran the first operator training course. And Chuck Odorizzi compiled the training standards and objectives manual for that course. 22 SAS sent over Ginger Flynn as an instructor in CQB to help them get going. They also developed links with the US Secret Service and the FBI, and these cooperations eventually, although they benefited Delta, they also benefited those agencies, which led to the creation of the counter-assault team unit in the Secret Service and the FBI's hostage rescue team. By chance, Wade Ishimoto was at O'Hare Airport, Chicago, en route back to the unit when on the TV screens came the news that there was a hijacking actually happening at the airport, on the ground at the airport. And he made a couple of phone calls and was put in touch with the FBI special agent in charge, and was able to observe the resolution of the incident. Delta also developed links with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, who were responsible for aviation security, and under the special aircraft jurisdiction laws were responsible for security aboard the aircraft when the doors were closed and the engines were turning. So they developed cooperating procedures. The FAA were able to arrange for aircraft for them so they could practice on all the different airframes, all the civilian airliners. They could fill their notebooks with positions of the hatches and the crew positions and so on, how the cargo was moved around an airport, all this kind of thing. And also the FAA came up with a way that Delta could move their weapons covertly if they were operating in plain clothes and had to fly using civilian air transport. Similarly, they developed links with the State Department, and this was particularly fruitful because the State Department had amassed a great deal of research and information intelligence about international terrorism, and Delta was then privy to this motherlode of tactical information. And for their part, the State Department were impressed with Delta, and this led to excuse me, Delta having a role in embassy security. They would send a couple of guys to the high threat embassies to conduct close protection and train the on-site guards and that kind of thing. This then gave Delta a foot on the ground in very high-risk areas and led to their amassing of even more information, and also able to tweak their SOPs. They did a considerable amount of shooting, and gunsmith Ron Wannanen was brought in to modify the 45 pistols, much in the way that they were modified for combat competitions at the time. They developed links with other agencies, including the nuclear energy security people, the NEST teams, and this led to the 0400 mission, colloquially known as loose nukes, which was the threat of nuclear/radiological attack. They did a lot of exercises and a lot of evaluations, and then there was a final evaluation at Fort Stewart, Georgia, which brought in international observers, including Johnny Watts from the SAS, Ulrich Wegener from GSG-9, and Christian Protow from GIGN, respectively the British, German and French national counter-terrorist teams. And Delta passed with flying colours, had an after exercise get together, and then as they're all winding down, the news came through that the Tehran embassy had been taken over by Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and that kicked off the planning phase, which was called Operation Rice Bowl, and then the actual Operation Eagle Claw. So the book details this planning, all the different options that were considered. Now, the one that they actually adopted was complicated enough, so you can imagine the ones that were rejected. Military free-falling into the middle of Tehran. Problem is, how do you get out again? This kind of thing. Seizing Tehran International Airport, going and kind of an Entebbe type situation, going in, cross city to the embassy, rescuing the good guys, getting back. All this without the bad guys on the ground being able to mount a significant counterattack. So the eventual Eagle Claw involved the US Air Force's Special Operations Wing, which specialized in long-range C-130 operations, air-to-air refueling, this kind of thing, short takeoff and landing on ill-prepared strips, as well as the United States Navy helicopter pilots with the RH-53 helicopters, which were carrier-borne. So in the event, it all went horribly wrong, and the story's been told many, many times. Wade Ishimoto gives obviously a very personal view of it. His job was, besides Delta on the ground, they had Rangers and guys from Det Alpha in Berlin. This is another unit discussed in We Defy. And the Rangers really were in a security role on the ground, securing the whole airhead, and they were kept very, very busy. And Wade Ishimoto was assigned with them, and they were buzzing round on motorbikes and jeeps. And they, first of all, in this remote desert location, it turned out that the road was more like the M25, because along came an oil tanker, failed to stop, so the Rangers lit it up with rockets and set it on fire, which illuminated the whole thing and obviously attracted attention. Then, if that's not bad enough, along came a bus full of passengers, men, women and children, and they had to be offloaded and secured by the Rangers. Bit of a problem what they were going to do with them had the operation gone ahead. But as we know now, they lost a number of helicopters on the flight in, and then there was a crash between a heli and a C-130, and the whole thing had to be aborted, and sadly lives were lost. The after action report, which was a whole commission, the Holloway Commission, but the main point that we could say was that the whole operation was very, very complex, and if they didn't even get past the staging operation, where they were just amassing the various formations on the ground at a remote location prior to the difficult bit, if that couldn't be achieved successfully, questions have got to be asked as to whether the actual operation would have succeeded, or whether it would have turned into an even bigger disaster than than Eagle Claw was. That's not for me to answer that question, but I'm sure it's occupied the minds of many military experts. And the other big problem was one that affects lots of military, but it was brought really into focus with this operation, and it's Buggin's turn. All the different arms of service and all the different branches of those arms of service wanted in. It was going to be, at the time, it was a time of peace. Vietnam had finished. There wasn't any obvious wars on the horizon. This was a chance to showcase your availability and your capability, and make sure you maintain your share of the budgets. So the Air Force wanted to be in, the Navy wanted to be in, the Marines wanted to be in, obviously the Army were already in with Delta. The commander, General Vought, had no special operations experience, but it must have been his turn. And eventually the Holloway Commission realised that this ad hoc grouping was detrimental, so a dedicated joint command was created, which was JSOC, to have all the different elements together So you had Delta, you had what was then SEAL Team 6, and you had the specialised aviation elements from the Air Force and the Army, fixed wing and rotary wing. The problem was that Buggins' turn, Mr. Buggins, was still alive, and even within JSOC you started to get this rivalry, which culminated when they were doing operations in Afghanistan, and the commander of JSOC and his deputy were both from aviation, which is, to my mind, a very, very silly thing, that you have the transport elements running the special operations. The book goes into quite a bit of detail of operations after the abortive Iranian rescue mission, but then I'll briefly mention his post-military career. He left and started working for Charlie Beckwith, who had also left and had started a security company called SAS in Texas, and Wade went to work for him. Unfortunately, Charlie, for all his insights and foresights of setting up a special operations unit to a world-class level, really didn't have a business head. He didn't really have the requisite funding backup, and really the whole thing foundered. Wade Ishimoto then went to work for various entities, and then as the Great War of Terror kicked off, was working in consultancy roles with the Pentagon and various entities there, and the intelligence community. One of the people he mentions he had worked with was Tom Quinn. In the early days when Delta was setting up links with the Secret Service, Tom Quinn was running their sniper program, and that's how he knew him. And he later, Tom Quinn, John McGaw took over the TSA and brought in Tom Quinn, a fellow Secret Service alumni, to run the Air Marshal program. And Wade Ishimoto is full of praise for Tom Quinn, but the Air Marshals would completely disagree. He was the guy who instructed that they wear smart business suits or similar attire aboard the jet, so they stood out like sore thumbs, compromised the cover, and he had no understanding whatsoever of aviation security. So, finally, the definition of the title of the book, the Intoku Code, comes from Aikido, and it refers to a code where honor is to the forefront, whether or not anybody really knows that you're doing the honourable thing or appreciates it, that you do it because it is the honourable thing. And Wade Ishimoto had long studied Aikido and eventually got to the exalted rank of 6th Dan. So there's a thread of martial arts throughout the book, as well as fascinating insights into the military. He's worked with and met a plethora of very, very interesting people, and has served many facets of special operations, and the book really is a fascinating read.